Okay, so I decided to make a second part to the first Godskin video, mainly because I felt like there was a lot of information that I hadn't covered in the first part. Yeah, surprisingly, even apparently 2 hours isn't enough, but yeah. Uh, so for the second part, I decided that I would be going through every single one of their animations, basically, or at least every single one of their relevant animations, explaining like how you can deal with them and all of that other stuff that usually people do in guides. This is probably going to get compiled by Recycle later on, but like for the time being, this is the best that you're going to get because like nobody else can be bothered to write about Godskin Duo. So I'm gonna start with Noble, I think, because I feel like this is the more straightforward one to explain. As you can see, I've like labeled every single one of their animations. Well, every single one of their combat animations, so it should be easier for me to parse what's going on and for you to see what exactly is everything that I'm clicking on. I'm also obviously going to be playing the animations as well, and I'll be explaining what the animations do and how you can deal with them. But okay, so I'm gonna skip over the movement animations like walking, idling, running, all of that other stuff, and I'll explain the interactions that they have with, well, the way that they are managed in combat at the end, because I feel like they're most not the reason why people are here, but there are a lot of interesting things to them that I feel like need to be said. So I'll actually do them in like consecutive order. So I'll start with animation 3000, first combat animation for Noble, the firm horizontal. This is surprisingly this is a very quirky animation in my opinion. So this one starts from neutral, as you can see. Oh. Oh. Has a very identifiable tell where he pulls his rapier over his shoulder and then does a pretty firm swipe with it, followed up by a very likewise firm poke, which is why I'm calling it firm horizontal and a firm poke. This original firm swipe actually hits extremely low to the ground, making it the hardest attack in his entire repertoire of rapier swings to duck with any variety of weapons. You're gonna get varying results. Usually, from my experience, straight swords are never gonna duck this, while stuff like Mantis Blade is gonna duck it with jumping charged R2s, with jumping R2s, for example. But you're still gonna have to time it really well. And even if you duck the horizontal, you are still going to have to roll the poke. Okay, the poke has a surprisingly high amount of tracking. Uh, so as you can see, the animation actually has tracking all the way until the animation reaches like hits the recovery moment, and he tracks for 125 degrees. Okay, obviously both hitboxes can be parried. I'm probably gonna be disabling sounds until I'm gonna be needing them because this is annoying. Welcome. I am in voice chat, so unfortunate if anybody speaks. That's probably fine. Okay. So most important thing about dealing with this, we have to think of this attack based on the range that you're interacting with it. So if you start from if you're very up close when he initiates this animation, then you actually would be able to roll behind him, either left or right, clockwise or counterclockwise. Ideally, you will roll counterclockwise behind him to his left, ensuring that you're basically, with parts and straight swords, for example, you're going to be able to get two L1s in if you do it this way. If you roll from a bit farther away, you're only going to get one. The idea here is that as long as you are actually able to get behind him, then you're not in danger of him hitting you, of him like queuing up any other animation, such as a belly flop in phase 1 or a noble presence in phase 2, that would endanger you in case that you want to perform two L1s. But if you don't manage to get behind him, so you started your roll like a bit further away than necessary, then you're only going to be able to get an L1 with parts and straight swords while he's still in the recovery of the animation, which you can see is about this much. This combo cancel jump table only initiates for follow-ups, which you're not going to trigger as long as you roll behind them, because follow-ups in this case would be something like either horizontals or follow-up poke. So follow-ups in that sense, basically. Not like, otherwise he has to return to neutral, which, I mean, this isn't exactly neutral, but it's closest. And at this point, he can cancel into something else. So for example, he can cancel into belly flop, in which case he would turn a bit beforehand, but as long as, provided that you're in front of him. Okay. You can indeed roll this animation clockwise, the original swipe, horizontal. If you do that, you're going to have to roll pretty far behind him so that the tracking of the poke is not going to be able to reach you. And also, surprisingly, in case you're doing no roll Godskin Noble, which is not advisable, the best way to deal with it is actually strafing it clockwise. Because the animation starts with, like, the hitbox on this starts really low, as you can see here, and the way that his rapier is angled makes it pretty much impossible to strafe counterclockwise, so you're going to have to run ahead of the rapier. And as you can see, the animation, the hitbox ends pretty early as well. So as long as you manage to get past that point, you're going to be safe. And once if you're sprinting, provided you're sprinting and you manage to not be hit by the horizontal, then the poke is not going to have enough tracking to actually hit you. He doesn't have an arm hitbox for this, so it's, again, very, very manageable to strafe in any direction. But yeah. Okay, moving on to front hop poke. Front hop poke is the main engagement animation that he can perform. Surprisingly, this animation is preferred by him even when he is in passive mode in the duo fight, for example. And as such, this animation should be treated very, very carefully and with a lot of respect. It is also a very fast animation, as you can see. That's basically the tell, just one forward hop and him moving his arms in a very specific way. That's telling you that he's going to poke. This animation can be strafed in both sides and has a neat interaction with player rolls. So, basically, okay, so if you're running at him, sprinting at him, or if you're very close, you can strafe this animation either left or right, clockwise or counterclockwise. It's easier to strafe it clockwise, but you're going to end up fully behind him, so you're not going to be able to bait the very specific follow-up that I'll be talking about in a moment. And you're also not going to be able to get as many punishes because you're going to force him into a side up at that point. Either that or a wobbly horizontal into poke, or something like a tail swipe if you get that far behind him. If you're strafing into the right, there is a chance that you're going to... there is a chance that he's going to follow up his melee moves. It's a bit trickier to strafe to the right, and because of the way that he turns his body, as you can see, it also means that you're still going to be somewhat in front of him. Like, there's not really a high threat of ending up behind him, which is here. So strafing to the right applies in situations where you would not want to end up behind him, which surprisingly applies a lot for no roll, because you don't really want to force side hops, and because disengaging against Apostle is not that great. Against Noble, apologies. Okay, and now for the special interaction, he has a very, very specific follow-up that he can do if you roll straight into him. It's a 120 degrees check. So it might not seem that lenient, but it has very specific timing, and as long as you manage to perform your roll correctly, you're gonna bait a single hill slam. So if you roll straight into him and you see the animation for the single hill slam start, which is this, well, not from this specific point, this one. think he probably starts the one from neutral like this. Yeah. Okay, so if you see this animation start, which as you can see has a pretty long tail, not only can you get like a hit in if you do a rolling attack or something, if you're fast enough to react, but also you can sprint around him and get behind him, and then you can get a really high punish window, especially if you're using Parsnip straight swords or any weapon of the like that's very fast. This animation can be very easily exploited in that way. Okay, but what happens if you're not close enough for you to be able to get to do either of these punishes? Well, the frontal poke is technically a gap closer, so even if you are not close enough, he is going to force you into that kind of close range. But that's alright. If you want, this animation can completely just be rolled away. If you're going to roll away because of the amount of distance that he covers, you are probably going to be in range of his follow-up poke, which is very fast. You have to be aware of that. You have to keep account of like the distance that you are relative to him, and to be aware of the range that he needs to be at for him to trigger the follow-up poke. In case you fulfill all of those conditions for the follow-up poke, then you have to queue up a roll. The follow-up poke is not reactable. You should not rely on being able to react to it. So you should be able to tell whether you are in a bad spot and you have to pre-roll for the follow-up poke, or if you're not. And if you have to pre-roll for the follow-up poke, it is actually advisable for you to roll further away from him, because then you're gonna be baiting delayed thrust. If and only if you are far enough from him when he started the front hop poke that you're not like right in front of him or something of the like, or after you rolled the front hop poke, then you can actually just walk up to him and you're going to blind spot the front hop poke, and this applies for any other and you're going to blind spot the poke follow-up is what I mean. And this applies to any other animation that can combo into the poke follow-up, which you're going to be seeing here. Whoop, this is the poke follow-up. This can happen out of every single poke in the fight. And as you can see, it's very, very fast. It gives you 24. It has a 24 frame windup basically. But because of the way that the animation works, as you can see, you're going to be hit frame 1, so it's like very dangerous. Frame 1 of the hitbox, I mean. Yeah. Okay. So that's the front up poke. Then this is the wobbly horizontal into poke. Very distinguishable as well. He moves backwards, and this is the most important thing. He tends to prefer doing this when you are to his sides, when you are behind him, or if you are pressuring him too much in front of him. Then he'll perform this animation. As you can see, the way that like the player is usually probably going to be around here, the distance that he travels when he retreats is actually going to make him whiff the wobbly horizontal, because he moves backwards. This is basically meant to ensure that enemies won't chase him, and then he goes back in for a poke. This poke will hit the player if they stand still. Meanwhile, the wobbly horizontal is not going to hit the player if they stand still. This animation doesn't have a lot of tricks to it, specifically. There are two ways of interacting with it. It's not exactly strafable, so you should probably avoid trying to do that. Usually players, for no roll, just outspace it, and then re-engage somehow. Try to find a re-engagement window. So like I said, there are two ways of interacting with this. Either you roll into him, ideally trying to be behind him, but the poke follow-up has a very the poke second part is what I mean, has pretty good tracking in such a way that it ensures that he is going to hit you if you're trying to strafe the poke. So you're gonna have to perform two rolls either way if you're trying to follow him. If you're not following him though, if you're following him, you're probably gonna be getting one rolling L1 with Parsnip straight swords. And if it's in phase 2, not even that, because he's probably going to combo this into the multi-hit combo, which you should be able to see here. This animation can happen out of basically every single attack in phase 2 that's melee with a rapier. And it is very fast. Another one of the animations that has a 24 frame windup. Very dangerous. people should be very mindful of this. Okay, so then this is one way of interacting with the wobbly horizontal into poke. What is the other way? The other way of interacting with the wobbly horizontal into poke is actually just moving away. It is very, very easy to do that. Because again, the first wobbly horizontal part doesn't actually connect with the player as long as they're not actually chasing the player. What this means is that you can just walk away from Noble, and then usually he will be baited into a fireball because of the range that you're gonna end up at this point. Unfortunately, baiting fireball is probably going to be the best opportunity, the best option for the player to interact with this attack, even though it's a bit more on the passive side. But it is a disengagement attack at its finest. So it is what it was made to be. It is doing what it was made to be doing. So yeah, you can't fail. You can't fault it for that, I guess. Okay. Next, like I mentioned, the poke follow-up. This is a very scary animation. Again, unreactable for all intents and purposes. Can be blind spotted. So as you can see, it hits higher than the prior. Well, with the exception of the overhead of the overhead poke, it hits higher than the prior poke. This means that it won't actually hit if you're right in front of him, especially because he actually moves forward. Oop. However, the fact that it hits higher also means that it will travel further, so it will hit further. So if you roll the first poke and you're in range to actually trigger this follow-up, then you even if you roll outside of the range of the first poke, you're still going to be caught by this, and you're going to be roll caught unless you are actually just going to queue up your roll in time. This is a very scary attack, but it is pretty much manageable. That's the most important thing. You will probably never see this if you're playing aggressively against Noble, at least in the solo fight, because in the solo fight you're usually going to try to stay up close to him, and this animation is just not going to happen because you have to be at medium range for him to trigger it to begin with. Again, if you're anywhere close, you're going to deal with it. If you're further away, you need to roll it. There are some weird tricks that you can do, like turning like a few frames before the hitbox starts, and that will basically make him whiff his attack. That's a bit sus, but it is doable. But yeah. Okay, next, twirling follow-up. This is a follow-up to any poke. It's a horizontal. I commonly call it a twirling horizontal. And this is actually a horizontal that makes him move forward while swinging. And this is very important because if you're trying to bait delayed thrust out of horizontals, it's going to be harder to clear the range that you need it to be clearing in order to be able to bait a delayed thrust, because he's moving forward. So you're trying to roll away from an entity that's getting closer to you. As such, if you're playing in such a way that you're trying to bait delayed thrust, you have to be mindful of that and probably roll further, or because of the length of this wind up, probably not immediately roll away. And try to create some distance, walk with him, and then roll the last moment. That's probably the best way of dealing with this. It is also jumpable over. As you can see, it also hits pretty low, at least if you're towards the tip of the rapier. So you can jump over it as you're trying to get away. And more importantly, because he moves forward, if you're up close to him somehow, and if you're usually not going to be close enough for him, that close to him if he's going to do this, because it's not really a close range animation. But if you're close enough to be able to walk in, this is a very easily strafable counterclockwise. You can just walk around him that way and punish. Because you're not going to be triggering a follow-up, so this cancel jump table is not going to trigger. You're going to have to wait. He's going to have to wait up until here until he can actually do anything, which means that you can probably going to get 2 power stance tracers at once, Mantis Blades charged R2. This is a very nifty animation to punish that most people don't actually take advantage of because they're not aware of how easy and how useful punishing this is. And yeah. Okay, if you don't manage to clear the range to the point where to clear this enough distance to the point where he would be baiting into a delayed thrust, then he's probably going to do a hilt poke. Hilt pokes are very fast. I should probably, instead of calling them fast, I should probably call them snappy, because as you can see, there are very few frames between the moment that he actually starts to swing and the moment that you're actually getting hit. And likewise, the hitbox only lasts for 6 frames, so it is just a very snappy animation altogether. Yeah, basically try to avoid getting this animation as a follow-up. If you are getting this follow-up, though, just be conscious of the fact that you can strafe it clockwise. So you can move with his arm, with his arm behind him, because he will naturally push you if you're far enough behind him, especially because of the way that his body and his leg move. There you go. He does have an arm hitbox, so you have to clear the arm before you actually try to engage with this. But that is the hilt poke follow-up. Okay, so these 3 follow-ups specifically: delayed thrust at far range, hilt poke at medium range, and if you manage to like get behind him at close range, then nothing. And if you don't manage to get behind him, then hilt slam in close range are the bread and butter of the fight in terms of follow-ups. So you should be mindful of them, because these apply to all of the animations, to all of the swipes. And to pokes, it's the poke follow-up and delayed thrust at the far range, because that's always the case. And horizontals. The fight has an interesting rhythm of horizontal poke, horizontal poke, horizontal poke. So that's how this goes usually. Okay, next up is the double wobbly horizontal. This animation makes him move forward. He does 2 swipes. One from his left to his right. As you can see, he has a very distinguishable tell, because he actually because his rapier is in his right hand, but he needs to start the swing from his left side. So he actually needs to bring his rapier to his left side in a pretty twirly movement, which is why I end up calling it the wobbly horizontal. And this animation doesn't have a lot of vertical tracking. You can jump over it pretty easily, but that's not the special part about it. Okay, so the animation doesn't hit that far behind him, as you can see. Right? Okay. So if you manage to strafe far enough behind him counterclockwise to clear the hitbox start of the first swing, then you're gonna be safe. And he's committed for the entire animation, all the way until here, if you're gonna manage to get behind him, because he's not gonna be able to queue up any follow-up in the form of a combo. So this is huge, basically. Even if you don't manage to strafe the first swing, you can still roll it, and once you roll it by like about this point, you're free to just punish him easily until here. Which basically means that you're going to be able to get 2 power stance straights or L1s, 1 charge start 2 with Mantis Blade. It's a huge punish window that more people should be trying to get. However, if you are incapable of taking this punish window, or if you're playing Godskin Duo where Apostle pressures you or something, then the next best way of dealing with this is actually staying at range, but not far enough that he won't actually queue up a combo follow-up after this. And at this point, you want to be about here, and if you are about here, then you are pretty much always going to get delayed thrust. If you are closer than that, in medium range, you're going to get the hilt poke, and if you are even closer than that, you are actually going to get the retreating double slash. And the retreating double slash is the worst follow-up to get in the entire fight, and you absolutely want to avoid it. It's this. Whoop, whoop. He moves backwards, has very low recovery. At this point, he can just belly flop, so it is very annoying. This can be strafed. This can be strafed with his arm. You can just move clockwise around him. Rolling it is unadvisable. If you see him do this, just roll away. don't try to chase him because you're not going to be able to punish it. If you're strafing it and you're actually full on behind him, you can actually take a punish, probably 1 or 2 hits. But those are gonna be very, very rare situations, so you should be avoiding them altogether. This is a follow-up that you absolutely 100% should avoid. There is nothing good to get out of this animation other than a really cool strafe if for some reason you're into that, which I can't blame you really. Okay, but yeah, this is a very handy animation to get delayed thrusts out of. And if you're trying to avoid or to delay transition or to get a better follow-up in order to delay the transition, then you should 100% try to get the health poke, because as long as he's stuck in follow-up loops, then he cannot either transition and nor summon. He cannot summon his ally. He cannot summon Apostle as long as he's stuck doing follow-ups. And the health poke is one of the animations that is very easily baitable in order to continuously bait follow-ups. Okay. Now that we've reached the health poke proper, I feel like we've mentioned most of the things relevant to the animation, but we can also mention the fact that this has really high root motion, so he will travel a pretty hefty distance in order to catch you, so it is very, very difficult to outspace. You should probably avoid trying to outspace it outright without rolling. With rolling, it is fairly straightforward, but yes. Okay, next is the 2 tail swipes. The 2 tail swipes come basically in a pair. It doesn't really matter. You can jump over both of them. They both behave the same way. One starts from the right, one starts from the left. Even in terms of acts in the AI, they're both in the exact same act, and one just gets queued up based on like the kind of orientation the player has relative to noble. You will see these when you're behind him. Not very easily outspaceable because he does cover quite a bit of distance, as you can see with it when he's outstretched. Ideal way of dealing with this is actually, if you're in phase 2, rolling into him is going to get you noble presence because you're going to be baiting noble presence out of it. If you're in phase 1, you want to roll with the tail swipe. Recognize the tail swipe and roll with it so that you end up behind him and punish it with a rolling L1. That's probably going to be the best that you're going to get out of it, because usually out of this, if you roll with it, you're going to end up still being behind him, and he's going to have cooldown on the tail swipe. So now he's going to be like forced to either side hop or do the wobbly horizontally to poke. Keep in mind that this animation is deceptively fast. It might not seem like it. It has 50 frames wind up. But like a lot of this, because you're behind them, it's hard to tell that this is going to happen. So yes, it's a very common punish that you're gonna suffer from if you're using like a heavier weapon that has longer recovery, and you're trying to punish with like jumping R1s, stuff like that, jumping R2s, that are gonna keep you grounded for a long time, and then you're just going to get tail swiped. Okay, hill slam follow-up. There are 3 variations of this. There's the common hill slam follow-up that happens out of horizontals, as you can see here. This is a follow-up out of horizontals. This happens obviously if you're in front of him. If you're in front of him, very close to him after a horizontal. There's the hilt slam out of hilt poke. Again, this will happen if you're in front of him, very, very close to him. And then there's the hill slam out of neutral, which doesn't always happen as neutral. It can happen as a follow-up as well, usually out of pokes. But yeah, this will also happen out of Black Flame Ritual, so you have to be mindful of it. The trick with this is all of the hill slams, both the single one that's delayed and the double one, have very high tracking, but can be well, it's not necessarily that they have very high tracking, but more so that the noble's body is large enough that it makes like strafing him properly more difficult. So it is going to be difficult for players to strafe this correctly. Keep in mind that when he slams, it's not just the weapon that has a hitbox. He actually does release a bullet. This bullet is a sphere around the impact point. This bullet doesn't deal damage, but it will stagger, so it counts as a hit, worst case scenario. You can jump over this. There are many ways of dealing with this. If you're getting this as a follow-up, it's very easy to just strafe around him and get a punch from behind him. Up to 3 hits with a power stance straight swords. Really nice animation to see. If, however, you can also get this as being triggered by Apostle. Apostle attacking, doing specific attacks such as jumps, fireballs, can trigger this if you're close enough to Noble in the duo fight. Okay, if you see it in the duo fight or in situations like that in general, the correct course of action is to actually outspace it and jump over it. The sphere bullet hitbox is jumpable, and the weapon is pretty small compared to other hitboxes in the game, and it's pretty easily you can just, as long as you start your jump in such a way that you get close enough that your jump is going to be here when the hitbox expires, you're going to be able to get the punish in. And this is commonly with parts and straights that you can get like one jumping L1 and one L1 and then get out very handily. This applies to all of the hill slams. More easily for the one from neutral, because again, it's not a follow-up. Okay, well, not commonly a follow-up. Okay, next. Delayed thrust. This also comes in 3 variations. There's the delayed thrust out of horizontal. There's the delayed thrust out of hilt poke. And then there's the delayed thrust out of neutral. Alright. The delayed, all of these behave the same way. Obviously, they're follow-ups from their respective attacks. And you're going to bait them if you're far enough away from him without being too far in order to trigger a fireball. They're very easily strafable counterclockwise. Like, you can just stand still and he'll just miss you because he pushes you away. However, it is extremely difficult to strafe clockwise. That is because of this giant arm hitbox that he has. And it's basically there to ensure that players will not be able to strafe this that way. And yes, this is a very fun animation. This is the bread and butter of Godskin Noble in the duo fight. You're going to be baiting this a lot. And this is baited also by Apostle doing specific attacks, such as jumps, fireballs, and the like. This is also easily strafable, being far enough away and just turning left or right, either way, in the last moment. As you can see, it has quite a bit of root motion. It travels quite a bit, has hefty range with it. Overall, a very enjoyable animation and something that you really want to see. Basically, pretty much all of Noble's combo enders, with the exception of the double retreating slashes, are very nice to see combo enders. So that's nice. Something that I cannot say about the next animation. This is the multi-hit combo. Multi-hit combo is the bane of people that have learned how to deal with Noble presence, and they didn't realize that there was something much faster than it in the fight. Multi-hit combo can happen even though the pose might suggest that it can only happen out of horizontals, with the starting pose. This animation can happen out of everything. Pokes, you got it. Horizontals, you got it. Hilt pokes, you got it. if Noble does something with the actual blade of his rapier, he can do this animation as a follow-up. It is insanely fast. As you can see, you only have 24 frames to react to it, so that's hard in and of itself. But there is the added pressure of the fact that some specific animations that are going to combo into this, like the overhead poke, will just have his arm in a very difficult to see position, that even if he actually combos into this, you're just not going to see any of that blending happening. So it will just add to the ridiculousness of this animation. This animation is doable. It is pretty easily outspaceable because it mostly consists of close range pokes, swipes. As you can see, they also like largely hit in front of him. They don't track very well. It is very, very easy to just roll the first one to the side and then not do anything. If you manage to mess up the first and the second hit, frame trap. So if you roll too late the first hit, then you are going to get frame trapped by the second, which is an uppercut. And the third one is there just to finish you off. Okay. And unfortunately, this isn't even an animation that was gonna give you a good punish. Usually, you're gonna get a rolling R1, but even then, that's like little. You're gonna get a rolling R1 L1 if you manage to actually strafe the first hit, to roll the first hit and then get behind him and blind spot the second hits. Otherwise, you're not gonna be able to punish this at all, because by the time that the third hit ends, there's only going to be like a few frames before you can cancel into the next thing, which is probably going to be Noble Presence, let's be honest. Or Belly Flop, which is even worse for phase 1. Alright. This is a combo. This is a combo ender, by the way, so that is pretty relevant as well, because you're not going to get anything better out of this. You can't bait this into something else. Well, you can bait Noble Presence out of it again, but that depends on your playstyle. Next, the double slam. This is not a follow-up. Well, it is a follow-up to very one specific edge case, but like in general, this is not a follow-up. As you can see, it starts from neutral. Very good tracking on the first hit. Second hit doesn't have that high tracking. Well, technically, okay, so the way this works is the first hit actually, they both share the same amount of tracking, but the first hit allows him to turn for much longer as opposed to the second hit. So if you manage to if you roll behind him, if you roll behind him on the first hit, then you can just strafe a few steps around him and then punish it. This is the optimal way of dealing with this. You really want to be doing this because you're going to be forcing the normal combat loop. We're going to be forcing a side hop, whatever else, side hop, wobbly horizontal, or tail swipe, which are all, well, with the exception, they're just, ideally you're going to get a side hop, punish the side hop, and then continue with a fight loop. But, yeah. Okay, but if you're unable, or if you don't instinctively react by rolling behind him on the first slam, if you roll away from him, there are actually multiple different ways of engaging with this. If you have a weapon that has high enough range, keep in mind each slam actually creates a bullet hitbox, which is a sphere again. I think it's 3 meters radius, so there you go. Okay, as you can see, it's even delayed a bit from the hitbox, so the this bullet detonates a bit later after the hitbox, so it's difficult to deal with it, but you can jump over it, so that's the most important part of it. So, if you have a weapon with high enough range, something like a Zweihander and a charge attack, Claymore, Mantis Blade, charged R2s, all of these attacks can actually outspace the first. You can roll away from the first slam and then charge up your attack, and you're going to be outspacing the second slam and the bullet hitbox that he's going to be creating, and then hit him. Because again, he does travel forward, as you can see on this second slam. So he's basically going to move towards you to allow you to land your hit. You can even punish if you have a weapon with like lesser range, something like power stance straight swords again. Then you can go for the other kind of punish here. You can jump attack over the hitbox, and if you do it early enough, you can get a jumping L1 and then another L1. This is more difficult to do on this animation than on the single hill slam. Less recovery, but yes, it is doable. It is consistent. But even getting one is good enough if you're like forced to roll away from him, either because he's flanked by pillars, obstacles in the arena, you don't react in time. Any of these is probably going to be best for you to do a jumping attack if your weapon doesn't have that kind of range, or if you're not confident enough in your ability to outspace the bullet hitbox. Okay, strafing it is basically equally easy on both sides, but if you're going to be strafing it completely, like the first part as well, for no roll, for example, then it's better to strafe it counterclockwise. All right, flurry next. This is a phase 2 animation. Very, very high priority in phase 2, and as such, it's very likely that you're going to see it a lot. It consists of 4 volleys. 3 attacks in the first, 2 attacks in the second, 1 and 1. The last one is slightly delayed and is going to roll catch you. If you're trying, this is one of the animations that are extremely difficult to fully iframe. So if you see this, do not try to fully iframe it. Just as the case with most noble animations, there are a few different ways of dealing with this, and you've probably heard it all before. Rolling behind him or outspacing it. If you're rolling behind him, there are 2 directions in here that actually matter. If you're rolling behind him clockwise, you're going to get a larger punish. With power stance straight swords, you can get 3 safe L1s, for example. It's easier to clear his front, because as you can see, rolling clockwise will put you behind him immediately. This can have benefits and negatives. It is a bit more scary to do this, because you can see, especially because his arm actually has a hitbox. So in general, be careful about this. If you're rolling counterclockwise, this is going to be easier, but your roll, because he's moving forward, is actually going to put you farther away from him. So you're going to actually have to turn around. You're not going to be able to immediately start attacking. So you're actually going to have to get up from the roll and then try to chase him and then start attacking. So you're probably only going to get 2 power stance straight swords L1s out of this, if you're going to punish it this way. Then there is the what the fuck you're doing dodge, which is rolling away on the first hit, and then rolling away if you haven't cleared the distance yet, then rolling away on the second hit as well. And then you're probably going to get a jumping L1 out of that, because it still has quite a hefty recovery. That's pretty nice, as you can see. But yeah, in general, this is not advised. Only do it if there are like obstacles in the arena that are flanking him. If for whatever reason you're incapable of like rolling behind him for this. This animation is very likely to happen out of Black Flame Ritual in phase 2. So be careful of that. It might be difficult to see. It is pretty fast. Not the fastest, but it is pretty fast. Just like every other noble animation, to be honest, but yeah. And its nature of being able to frame trap people makes it very, very scary. Right. Next up, we have the special animations for phase 2, the balloon and the roll. Balloon is weird. There are a few tricks that you can do here. So first of all, as you can see, the inflation takes a while. If you react fast enough to it happening, which is completely doable, you can punish the beginning of the inflation. So you can punish before he even inflates. Then he creates a bullet that doesn't deal damage, pushes you away. If you roll this, you can actually get a rolling L1 after he inflates, as he's taking off. And then when he lands, you can get your punishes again. For how to deal with it, there are a few different ways. The one that I prefer is actually just rolling the inflation, walking counterclockwise around him, and he got behind him, and rolling the slam. Being here, basically. Punishing it, forcing a side up. Sometimes on rare occasions, his AI is going to get completely messed up, and he's going to think that you're in front of him, so he's going to do follow-ups as if you were in front of him. And if that happens, you're just going to get a twirling horizontal for free that you can punish completely. You can get 3 L1s out of it, for example, with parts and straight throws, just because he's just going to do an attack that's going to whiff. You don't have to do anything to deal with it, which is really helpful. But there are other ways of dealing with this. The other way is just staying in front of him and rolling in front of him. If you do this, you're going to be baiting Noble Presence. Be very mindful of the fact that he's probably very likely just going to do Noble Presence afterwards. If you want to quickly clear the timer on Noble Presence, the cooldown, this is how you do it. This and the roll, ending up in front of him for the roll. And the third way of dealing with this is by creating enough distance and then jumping over the slam. So when he lands, as you can see, he has a body hitbox. This will hit you in the air. But he also creates a bullet that is very large, but it doesn't hit in the air. So if you jump over it, you can actually do a jumping attack on him when he lands. And this is a very, very helpful thing, especially if you're using like a larger weapon that has a very long wind up and recovery. This is the best way to get strong attacks in the fight. Okay, and then you have the roll. I love the roll. Many people don't. That's okay. Again, one of the in this case, the animation, this inflation comes out too fast for you to be able to naturally react to punish before the actual inflation part. So you're gonna have to roll the inflation. You can get a punish afterwards. It's probably gonna be a rolling L1, and then you can even get a second punish, another L1 afterwards before he takes off. As long as you are behind him, he's just going to fly away. He's not gonna hit you. Keep in mind that he actually gets a hitbox on the first slam, loses the hitbox, and then he gets a hitbox again. So this is pretty relevant. Okay. He actually has as you can see, just to allow him to create the distance that he needs, he has lower tracking on the start of the roll, because otherwise he's just going to enter the loop immediately. What this means is that once he starts the roll, he's going to go away from you for a bit. You want to be chasing him for this. Either chase him for no roll, or stand still and wait for him to actually start tracking you better for the roll loop. And once he starts the roll loop, roll through his model once, and then start chasing his tail, basically. Other things to be mindful of relative to this is that he creates a sound behavior here. The sound communicates with Apostle, who is the only enemy in the game that can hear it. And this basically makes it a 99% that Apostle is going to idle at the start of Noble's roll, assuming that Apostle wasn't in the middle of an attack already. If Apostle was in the middle of an attack already, then he's not going to be able to hear the sound. So try to avoid baiting rolls out while Apostle is doing things. Keep in mind that the roll is an animation that doesn't really care about your position relative to noble. This can happen close range, far range, though you're more likely to bait it at far range. It can happen if you're behind him, left, right, forward. Again, more likely to bait it when you're behind him because he just doesn't have as many options. Overall, the start of the roll is pretty convenient. He gets two SP effects during it. 15,517 and 15,580. 17 lasts 10.5 seconds and 18 lasts 9 seconds. These are going to inform the overall duration of the roll. Because as we're going to see, the roll consists of 3 attacks that are basically following each other up in a sort of combo. The combo will start with the roll start, obviously, and then once he gets 15,517 and 15,518, his AI is going to be told to loop roll the middle section of the loop. So this 1.5 overall 1.46 seconds long animation is going to be looped for as long as noble has 15,518, which lasts 9 seconds. This animation is going to get looped. So generally, you're going to get about 6 loops. The animation has 2 different tracking values. And it oscillates between 100 and 200 degrees, just to make sure that he's going to be lenient enough with you that he's not going to continuously pursue you with 200 degrees, but also that he's not going to completely lose you with 100 degrees. As such, it is possible to get him into a stable orbit around you. And you can punish by hitting ahead of him, etc. Okay, and then once the 9 second SP effect expires, he's still going to have the 10.5 second SP effect. And then if he only has the 10.5 second SP effect, then his AI is going to be told to perform the ending of the roll combo, which has, as we can see, 200 tracking. So this is the higher track. This is basically going to have higher tracking than usual, and he's going to end ideally in front of you. So here's where something interesting happens. If you manage to get him into a stable loop around you, then he's going to perform 3 revolutions around you, 3 stable revolutions around you, before he's going to, this is generally speaking, you're going to be able to adapt live in combat to different varieties of this. But generally he's going to perform 3 revolutions around you, and then he's going to do the roll end. So you can anticipate the roll end and just outspace the roll end and charge an attack that you're going to hit him with at the end of the roll. This is very helpful, and this is also going to bait noble presence if you favor that kind of playstyle. Because of the nature of this animation, and it has higher tracking for longer than the actual roll loop segments have, this is actually more difficult to roll through, because you're going to have to clear a larger part of the sphere than you normally would have to. So generally, rolling through this is more difficult, but rolling to the side is equally suicidal. So you're gonna have to time the roll through the ending better. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. All right, and as you can see, the hitbox expires pretty early. Like this whole thing at the end, it doesn't have a hitbox, so he will push you, he will take you with him, but he won't do anything. You can get 2 punishes with Parsnip Straight Swords, 12 ones. That's decent. Okay, next up, Black Flame Ritual. Black Flame Ritual is an interesting animation. It has a sound cue at the very beginning of the animation, as this. So the moment that you hear it, you actually can reliably punish him. If you just queue up an attack on command, Pavlovian response to the sound cue, then you can just punish the very beginning of the wind-up of Black Flame Ritual and then get out. But most people don't do that, and that's fine. A very large part of this animation is actually harmless. Even once he actually creates the bullet, it's going to take a bit for the bullet to propagate and create the child bullets that are going to be needed to create the Black Flame Ritual wall, circle. Okay. Most people have the misconception that you can stay inside the Black Flame Ritual. This is inadvisable. And by inadvisable, I mean don't do it. It's not consistent by any means. The Black Flame Ritual circle has randomized diameter. And not only that, but all of the attacks that he can perform while you're inside the Black Flame Ritual circle will push you out of it. He can do Hill Slam, the single delayed Hill Slam, or the double Hill Slam, both of which have enough root motion to push you out of the Black Flame Ritual circle. So then you might say that you're just going to stay in front of him, punish him, and then when he starts winding up the attack, then you're going to roll out of the Black Flame Ritual circle. Unfortunately, there is a possibility that the circle is just small enough that you're just going to get hit on the moment that it spawns. Especially because the way the bullet works is it creates small explosions initially that then create smaller bullets that will keep rising out of it. Also, jumping over Black Flame Ritual is only doable at the start of Black Flame Ritual, because that is before the explosion bullets had time to actually initiate creating the children bullets that will keep rising up, because the children bullets will hit you if you're trying to jump over the wall. Okay then, so how are you going to be dealing with this? I mentioned this in part 1 as well, but you're going to stay in front of him, and while you're in front of him, be mindful and keep a keen eye on what he's going to be doing. If he's going to be doing a delayed thrust in front of him outside of the ritual circle, if he's going to do a delayed thrust, then you're just going to roll it, which is perfectly fine. You're going to try to roll behind him. If he's not going to do a delayed thrust, he's probably going to be doing a fireball. And if he is going to be doing a fireball, then you can just strafe around the ritual circle. And as long as you manage to strafe about 120 degrees, you're going to end up here around. The fireball animation is going to make him just step out of the Black Flame Ritual, and he's going to whiff. He's going to shoot his fireball over your head. So you can charge up an R2 with Mantis Blade, or get a handy punish with Parson Straight Swords. If there are obstacles in the arena, you're not going to be able to do that. So the other ideal way of dealing with this is creating some distance diagonally and then rolling back in, because the farther you are, the more he's going to try to step out of the Black Flame Ritual circle to hit you with the fireball. And you're going to be rolling the fireball, getting one rolling L1. In phase 2, it's pretty non-scary, because Noble Presence takes a while to hit you, but Belly Flop will hit you immediately. Like, it will hit you in 26 frames. So that is scary. And then in phase 2, this branches out a bit, because he can also do Noble Roll out of this, regardless of your distance. He can also do Balloon. He can also do Flurry. And if he does any animation that's going to keep him in the circle at the end, and if you're in front of him when he's done with that animation, he can even do Noble Presence while he's inside of his own circle. So, which is pretty difficult to recognize. Okay, next up, Fireball. There is a lot to say about this. This is the very easy way of cheesing Godskin Noble, because if you're at range, he's very likely going to do a fireball. He's not going to run at you. And if he does fireball and he is behind a friend, an ally in a 100 meter radius, so very, very far away, then he's going to precede this fireball with a side hop. So there is a very easy cheese to the fight. Oh, cheese. Where you just run away, you wait for him to side hop, and then you run at him, and the fireball is gonna miss. Because as you can see, he moves forward when he throws the fireball, and he throws the fireball pretty high up as well. So if you're here, basically, if you're in this spot, he's just going to miss the fireball completely. Which is pretty shameful of him, not gonna lie. Okay, it is the same fireball as the Apostle Fireball. However, because of the way that he's throwing it, it is actually more difficult to strafe for no sprint than Apostle Fireball, because it will come at you at a more acute angle. And yeah, in general, you're gonna want to run to sprint strafe this, not to no sprint strafe this, or just blind spot it the way that I was explaining it before. All right. You can get 3 punishes with Parson Straight Swords, and if you're free aiming your hits, trying to get behind him, you can even get 4. So overall, a very handy animation. Noble Presence. This is the bane of everybody that starts fighting Godskin Noble. And one of my favorite attacks in the game. Has 26 frames, my bad, before it starts, before he starts creating it, but the bullet has 3 frame propagation time, so you're actually not going to be hit by it until frame 29. So in that respect, it is slower than the belly flop from phase 1. This also has a neat interaction with players. If you get hit by this, and only if you get hit by this, then you're going to be knocked up, and he's going to be forced into a hill slam follow-up. Okay, there isn't much to be said about this. It has a soft cooldown, so even if it's tricky to punish with fast weapons. You can roll it, stay in front of him, punish it, and then you're gonna be safe. But no matter what you do, roll behind him, roll in front of him, roll away. This cannot have follow-ups other than if you get hit by it. And yeah, this can only happen if you're in front of him. So you're not gonna see it if you're behind him. He's gonna try to face you if he wants to do it. He's gonna side hop or whatever, and once he is facing you, he's going to do Noble Presence. The easiest way of telling if he's gonna do Noble Presence, if you have difficulty by recognizing the tell, is if you're slightly to the side, but which still counts as in front of him, then he's just going to snap. He's not going to turn. He's just going to teleport in front of you, basically. And if he does that, that is a Noble Presence all the time. It's guaranteed 100% sure that if he snaps to face you, that it's going to be Noble Presence. Do not try to pre-roll this, though, because you're going to get frame trapped. So be careful. I'll let it play a few times just so people can get familiarized with the tell. Easiest way to recognize it is him bunching up his fists, putting his head down, and then that's it, basically. It's a pretty funny animation, I'm gonna lie. Transition. I've talked about this a bit more in part 1, but basically you can get two punishes as he's levitating in the air, and then if three punishes before he starts queuing up the next attack. The next attack can be Noble Roll if you are outside of the radius of the transition AoE, or Balloon if you're inside the radius of the transition AoE. So try to be inside of the radius, basically. And that's it, basically. It does track. It has 100 degrees tracking, so he's going to be facing you, so you can't really end up behind him to do some weird things. Next up, the Fumbling Horizontal. Fumbling Horizontal, as you can see, is a follow-up out of Pokes. It consists of him retreating. This is a pretty scuffed animation, and a pretty scuffed follow-up. It has a funny thing about it. So first of all, don't chase it. It's not gonna do you good. It's not gonna hit you where you were. If you are slightly away from him, it is not going to hit you where you were. And as a result, it's ideal to just move slightly away from it. In phase 1, it doesn't have follow-ups. The AI does have follow-ups for it, but whatever FromSoft did, they kind of never allowed the AI to actually enter those phase 1 follow-ups. So, In phase 2, he does get follow-ups, and if you just outspace it by a bit, then he's just going to do delayed thrust out of it. So this is a very good follow-up that for some reason just doesn't exist in phase 1, even though he should be. Okay, next is the overhead poke. On the Fumbling Horizontal, I didn't mention this, but don't try to strafe it to the right, because he's retreating during it. It is to the right, to your right, or like counterclockwise, because he's retreating during it, and it's difficult to actually maintain that kind of positioning. Okay, next up is the overhead poke. This animation is blind spottable, like in front of him. This will just miss. If you're in front of him, you will not get hit by this, as you can see. Whoop. It has longer range than all of his other pokes, even than the poke follow-up. And if you get a poke follow-up out of this, then he's gonna travel a pretty long distance. It's scary. Like it's more often than not going to catch you if you're thinking that you can outspace it. It has fucking interactions with stairs, so also be careful of that. Generally, you just want to blind spot it, and because of the range that it has, you're very often going to see the poke follow up out of this. If you are blind spotting it in phase 1, this usually combos into the Fumbling Horizontal. Whoop. But in phase 1, he can return to neutral. He has about this much time before he returns to neutral, and then he can do belly flop if you're in front of him. So you can actually get a punish, like a full L1 with power stance straight swords, but then you're gonna have to pre-roll in case he does belly flop. This is fine. In phase 2, it gets even worse, because this can combo into the multi-hit combo that I mentioned, into this. For some reason. Yes, he never reaches this pose, but it can combo into this. And because of the way that this animation happens, it is extremely difficult to recognize, because you're going to be here to recognize that this is going into the multi-hit combo. You won't see anything, basically. He'll just pull his sword back and hit you. So be very careful of having to react to the multi-hit combo in phase 2. Okay, next is the elbow slap. Elbow slap happens if you're in front of him, very close by, just like the belly flop. And the way that it works is basically it slaps you with its elbow. Has very low range. It doesn't really do anything. It's mostly a meme. The funny thing about this animation, though, however, is the fact that it's very easily loopable, because this and the belly flop are reactions to him being hit. So he performs this animation. You hit him, you punish him. If you start your attack while he's still mid-swing, because it has such low range, you can just be here, start your attack, and you're gonna hit him immediately once his arm is past the point where he can hit you. You can even hit his arm with your swords while it has hitboxes, because of how pathetic his range is. But so he's gonna swing his arm, he's gonna get hit, and then he's gonna do it again as a response to getting hit, which is pretty silly. He can just combo this multiple times. We have seen it even 5 or 6 times in a row, which is very, very silly. Be mindful of the fact that it can happen. It can likewise, just like the elbow slap, belly flop can happen out of as a response to him being hit. Okay. Retreating double I've mentioned already. Do not get this attack. Avoid it at all costs. So then there's the belly flop left. Phase 1 is notorious for the belly flop. This is faster than Noble Presence by virtue of the fact that Noble Presence has propagation time for the bullet. So this is a pure 26 frame window. Harder to recognize because he doesn't actually move his body as much. As you can see, he pulls back as opposed to forward, so it's like more difficult to tell. Doesn't deal damage. This hitbox doesn't deal damage. It is fairly easy to outspace. In fact, you can actually hit him while the hitbox is active with Power Staff Straight Swords. So, if you train yourself to be far enough away from him at all times, or whenever it is necessary, because he cannot queue this up at any time, then you can properly attack him in neutral. This is a response to him getting hit, but as long as he is getting hit from a safe distance, then even if he does trigger this animation, it is not going to hit you. And to add insult to injury for him, this attack is completely punishable. You can punish it, and he'll do it again, entering a loop of sorts, like with the elbow slap. This is an attack that cannot happen if you're behind him, just like in Noble Presence. And yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. There's not that much to it, but it does influence phase 1 a lot, and that is important. Okay, next is summon animation. The only thing that I need to mention about this is that he is actually, like, this is an animation that happens out of neutral, and as such has its own act, and as such is delayed. Like, it cannot happen while he is in the middle of a combo or a follow-up chain. And because of that, it is very easy to delay it just by baiting up attacks. Especially if you can bait attacks while also punishing them. And because Noble has a theoretical infinite combo chain, it's not going to happen. You're going to have an infinite combo chain, but it is theoretically possible. In theory, it is also possible to just forever delay the summoned animation, which is pretty silly. Okay, next up, Roar, which never happens in the game because FromSoft messed up. There just needs to never be an ally that is awake in a 100-meter radius around him, which is never going to happen. Side hops back hops only happen. In solo fights, back hops only happen if in response to being attacked and trying to dodge you. And in the duo fight, they just happen as repositions. While side hops, on the other hand, they happen when you're behind him, trying to reposition so that they can face you. They are punishable both in phase 1 and in phase 2, more easily in phase 2 because they can queue up. Well, they can lead into Noble Presence, which again has a longer wind up. They can also lead into Belly Flop in phase 1, which however is not that great. So you basically have to start punishing it very early. Usually you will pre-punish this because you know it is going to happen. Like, side hops are very easily recognizable just because you know they're going to happen, because you're going to be behind him more often than not, and he's not going to have any other options other than tail swipe, and especially if tail swipe is on cooldown, it's not going to happen. And that is pretty much everything related to Godskin Noble. At least in terms of animations. There is more related to the AI, but that is for another time. I was going to do both Godskin Noble and Apostle today, but this has gotten very long, and Apostle is more complicated than Godskin Noble. So I'm going to leave Apostle for Perspective Part 3 some other time. Stay tuned for the full series, I guess, at this point. But yeah, thank you. Like that.